So I'm hoping most of the participants work in a school, right?
Yes, yes. Most of the participants are teachers or educators who have part of their job is educating others, either children or adults.
Got it. So
Yeah,
we'll try to take examples from a school setting as much as possible.
exactly. And then personal life as well.
Of course. So once everyone joins, I'll make sure. Just let me know whenever most of the participants are here.
Okay.
The words on the slides may refer to school or student, teacher, but it's very easy to adapt those scenarios for personal life or other workplaces.
Sounds good. Okay, great. All right, so let me start by welcoming everyone. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Happy Saturday. I know for most of you it's Saturday night. This is our session number 18. So we had 18 sessions so far, all been recorded and emailed to you. This is part of Your Everest nonprofit leadership skills series. We've been talking about so many different topics so far, from communication skills, financial literacy, time management, child psychology, building collaborative classrooms. And then today we're going to be talking about conflict management. And that's a big part of communication skills. As you guys see, we've talked about here and there about communication skills and their importance. And doesn't matter what your job is. For teachers, of course, very important. For any person as a leader in your personal life and professional life, learning communication skills and how to deal with conflict and conflict management is pretty important. Okay. So I want to welcome my great friend Tamana. Me and Tamana, we met in a program that we both participated together by Your Everest organization. It was an amazing organization who has a program on peace building. And we are on the same cohort, and we were actually buddies together in one of the sessions to kind of talk and practice listening skills together. So she was so kind when I asked her to come and be a part of this program. She kindly accepted, and she's here today. Thank you, Tamana, for accepting my invitation and being here today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Sarah. Actually, I was pretty excited for this session because even though I've been in this field, conflict transformation, management, and resolution, but every time we talk to a lot of different people or participants in our sessions, there's so much more to learn. I think as humans, the knowledge that we have collectively is infinite. So I'm very excited to start this journey with you. And if everyone is ready, we'll start the slides in a couple of minutes. I'll just say my namaste, hello to everybody. I'm right now in Jammu and Kashmir, which is pretty close to Nepal. So we're at the same time zone. And I'll try to take it slow because some of you may be aware of what conflict is, how to manage it. But if you're not, we'll take it together very slowly. And we are a small bunch. So please feel free to type in comments or unmute yourself, and do not wait for it, just unmute. And if you have any doubt, if you want me to repeat, or if you want to add something to the session, please feel free to do that. Okay, so we'll be in this together. Let's start. So I'll be looking at two screens, so don't mind that.
Okay. Is this okay, or do you want me to go to the full screen?
Yeah, you can go to the full screen. I think this would be great.
Do you see the screen? Are you seeing this screen or the other one? Because I have two screens.
No, I see the screen. So
okay,
it's good. We just, everyone can show your hands if the screen is good for you. It's written conflict management, right? So you can see conflict management written, right? Okay. Yes. Okay, most of you. Okay, great. So let's just move on to the next slide, Sarah. Just one tab. So conflict management, the phrase sounds a little bit big, a bit of an expert topic, but in reality, it's very simple. And as we all know, in simple terms, it's made up of two words: conflict and management. But what is conflict? What is it that we are attempting to manage in our day-to-day lives, in our workplaces, schools, families? What is it? So before we move on, before you tap next, Sarah, I would like to ask all of you, if possible, you can type in the chat what word comes in, one word that comes to your mind when you hear the word conflict. Meanwhile, Sarah, you can like tap once or twice, so there will be clues. For example, for me, conflict, I look at conflict as opposition, like opposing thoughts, opposing scenarios. If all of you can just type in what it seems to you, what you think about conflict. Like, is it an animal? Is it a feeling? What do you think conflict is? You can use the chat box if you're, I hope you can use the chat box to communicate.
Or feel free to unmute yourself and just say it out loud.
It is a disagreement between parties. We argue each other.
Great. I think that's great. So as we can see on the screen, like you can just chime in, just unmute yourself, tell me what it feels for you to understand conflict. How do you see it? Different, which is not similar, definitely. Yes, incompatibility, sometimes we clash. So these are some of the words that come to our mind, right? Now we'll move on to how do experts define conflict as? Now, next slide, Sarah. One more time. So, okay. So these are some phrases, sentences. Do not be, these might seem like big sentences, different ideologies. I'll try to break it down to you. So usually conflict is seen as a disruption of our daily lives. Now, how does a daily day-to-day scenario get disrupted? Maybe a different thought comes up in our own mind, right? Or we want something else and someone in our family wants something else. Or there's an idea that we want to present at the workplace, but someone else wants, to go the other way. Next tap. You can tap twice, Sarah. We can also, describe it as an active disagreement, as one of you said, like opposing thoughts and disagreement. So what is this disagreement? It could either be within ourselves, like I want to get a new job, but the money is not good. So I'm having different thoughts within myself. Sometimes it's between people. Like a very simple example, I want to have vanilla ice cream and someone wants to have, strawberry flavor. So these day-to-day small disagreements, or even bigger ones, like there's a river flowing between two countries and a country wants a specific share and the other one does not want to let go of it. But in spite of it all, it's just simply put, conflict is a result of opposing thoughts, or opposite actions. So whatever is usual for us, whatever is very common, we are used to it, it disrupts the status quo. So that is conflict. But it's very natural, it's unavoidable, and there's nothing to worry because mostly it's often selfish. We want something and the other person, or even within ourselves or other organization, other group, want something totally different. So if we go by this definition and whatever I've told you yet, you would be able to recognize conflict in your day-to-day life. It's something that we see every day, and it's not always bad. It's also a very productive phenomena. And I'll try to share a different perspective after some time. So we think of conflict negatively because usually we associate it with violence or war happening between different countries. So which is why, whenever conflict crops up, we always have negative violent images in our head. But what if I tell you that the reality is that if we manage conflict properly and maturely, it can actually lead us to positive growth and results. Yes, I'll tell you how it is possible. So we'll move on to next slide for now. 1 minute. Okay, so because I assume that most of you work in school or educational settings. So let's just explore different type of conflict settings. Now that we have explored the meaning, the definition of conflict, Like, how do we identify it? Most of these words would be from school settings, but just in your mind, just attune it to whatever scenarios you deem fit. For example, you'll find similar types in your house, in your family, among peer groups, in your offices. Okay, so let's go. So the first type is interpersonal conflict, and it's the most common. Okay, because this happens between individuals, and as humans, we are in groups, we are in pairs, so it's very easy to feel opposing ideas clash because we have different personalities, we bring different work styles, different values. We even perceive one thing so uniquely and differently from each other. Okay. Now, conflict with the manager or supervisor in office, maybe the manager disagrees with our job expectation, our job performance, or how we want to manage a certain given task. Or it could be conflict over resources. If we go to the next part, Sarah. Okay. So you can keep tapping and I'll try to speak. So conflict over resources. Sometimes, for example, at home, if there is just one piece of sweet and we want, me and my siblings, we both want a larger share. So just a small example. But for example, in a workplace, in a school, maybe we are competing for limited resources. I want more time for my class for a certain section, and someone wants the same time slot for the same time period. Or maybe we need some equipments, we have limited scarce resources, and because human nature is to think about themselves first, so we'll be scampering over them. Like, I want more, or you do not take my share, like that. Or it could also be role conflict. For example, I perceive my role and responsibility as something else. So it can create conflict between not just two teachers, but also entire classes on, what their expectations are, or even organizational change. I'll just speak about school settings for now, but for example, uh, timetable restructuring or downsizing the department or change in policies, or even in home, if you're just a couple and newly started your life, or maybe a small nuclear family, then you may have disagreements about the timeline of events in your family. These are just small examples, but since you have these different types of conflicts on the screen, try and associate with them. Have you seen examples or types of these in your setting, what you are thinking of right now? For example, at your home, at your office, in your school, in your classrooms. Next slide, Sarah. Okay, so I'll talk more about different conflicts that we encounter in schools. But before that, if all of you can take 3 to 4 minutes, just sit down and with all the past knowledge that we have gained in the past few minutes, what are the different types of conflicts, and which is that one conflict that you want to pick? If you have a place to note it down, or even in your phones, taking notes, just write down one conflict situation that you are currently experiencing in your workplace, or even in your personal life, whatever is at most priority, or whatever is disturbing you the most, or whatever is keeping you more interested or engaged. So is that okay? I'll just have a look at everyone. Yes, so just raise your thumb to show that you're writing it. Okay, great. So I'll give you 3 minutes now to write it down. So we'll be using a pen, copy, or a phone to take notes. So while you're writing, I'll keep talking to myself, but also hopefully you will listen a little bit. In schools, especially, there are different types of conflicts. Sometimes there are conflicts between teachers. Maybe there is lack of communication. Our personal interests are different. How we want students to grow is very different. Or we share some previous history because of which we have a present conflict. There are sometimes issues of power, political, ideological differences. Then sometimes we also have conflicts between students and teachers. Or maybe student is not able to understand the way the teacher is trying to teach, or thinks the best way to teach us. They don't understand it. The teacher's explanation doesn't match. Maybe the student is not happy with the grades, or there's a divergence from what was the initial course set expectation. Maybe the student is not interested and teachers want them to show more interest. There could also be conflict between students. A school is a very dynamic place. We come from different backgrounds, different personalities. It's so dynamic and vibrant. We all bring our own, also misunderstandings, fights, rivalry. Sometimes we have biases that are already set from childhood that we are bringing onto our school, even if the school is a very secular and inclusive place. But the people and the students, the teachers, the staff that come into it may bring their biases. So there could be bullying, there could be, and between students also, there could be harassment, sexual harassment, loss of school assets, or maybe someone fought over a trivial thing. I think can we have a show of hands if you've written down a present conflict in your life? If you can keep the camera on for some time. Or maybe you can write in the chat, and Sarah, you can see everyone is done. Also, I would understand if you cannot keep the camera on. It's totally up to you. But if you can, I would be able to see. Do you need some time to write it more? One conflict that you're dealing with right now? Or shall we move on?
I think maybe like if they like to share, anyone who likes to share, like Esther, Amrita, do you like to share? Or Manisha, Purnima, Jasmine, any conflict you want to share? Nita?
Yeah, I think I can see in the chat box. Okay, I'll just read it out. Right. So absolutely, Nita. This is definitely a conflict situation. So what I would suggest is we can take notes for now, and towards the end, after we have learned how to manage the conflict, we can just compare our notes. Probably, if it helps, that will give you some more time to think about it and write in detail. Okay. So we'll move on to the next slide, Sarah. Okay, so the negative consequences of conflict. So remember, if you remember, I had told you in the beginning of the session that conflict can be good and bad. We may be very easily able to identify the bad parts of it because that's usually what the brain registers first. So we'll just share I'll share some of the negative consequences and effects of conflict. But if something else comes to mind, additional ones, you can see on the screen some of the consequences. Please feel free to type it in the chat box and I'll read it as I go. Or in fact, even better, once I'm done speaking, we'll have a 1-minute window and you can share some other negative effects that you have felt as a consequence of conflict. Okay, so I'll just read down some. Sometimes we are so engrossed in our trivial conflicts or even important conflicts that we do not have energy to spend on the actual task. So it diverts all the positive energy that is required to solve a problem or to carry out day-to-day actions. And like we talked about resources, especially in educational settings, they are already very scarce, and any kind of conflict on those resources only leads to wastage of them, and like we mentioned before, diverting our time and energy from the actual task at hand. And there's this feeling of discontent when we are not feeling happy within, when we are dealing with a situation that's surrounded by fear, uncertainty, that ends up us not being at peace. And as a result, there's always some sort of negativity around in the climate. Now, I gave you the example of school, but even at home, sometimes it feels, right? And I read some of the conflict scenarios that some of you are experiencing. So I'm sure you would have experienced once there's a disagreement or, a clash, we experience that the other person or even we could be hostile and we become passive aggressive. Now, this is not a very positive environment, to put it lightly. As a result of this, we do not want to communicate our needs or what the actual problem is. And if we look at the group dynamics, then the power balance shifts and the group dynamics just change completely. We don't want to work together as a group, but we sometimes get divided. Sometimes we hoard our resources, and all of this, like I told you about the school. So if if two teachers or teacher and management is fighting over something, they do not, their ideas don't align, it inevitably would lead to inefficient results. The student would, of course, not get the entire attention of the teacher. And even if we talk about homes or in friendships, in peer groups, it's impossible that it does not affect our psychological well-being. I mean, in negative climate, it's very hard to bloom and to grow. So these are some of the negative consequences of conflict. Can I have the next slide? So, like I had said, that conflict is not always negative. It could also be an opportunity for growth and development. And how is that? Conflict can sometimes lead to new approaches, because the past way of functioning wasn't working out. We were not able to resolve our differences. So let's take a new approach to the problem. And whenever there is some negativity or a setback that we experience, we try to circle around the problem, take a new route, and there's a lot of novelty and creativity that we awaken within ourselves. And as a result, we definitely will have better decisions. And when we are in the pursuit to solve a problem, if there is no harmony within ourselves, with another person, we'll always try to think about how to become better instead of how to make the other person better. If that is not happening, we'll go inwards and think, okay, maybe I can talk nicely, or maybe I can go quiet. I should not talk a lot, or I should not disagree without thinking about the problem. So it would lead to self-growth. This is a very positive outcome, and it led from conflict, right? And I hope you're able to see that conflict is not always bad, because as humans, we will always be surrounded by conflict. It's not possible to be in a situation where there are not opposing actions or opposing ideas. And you see that playing between neighboring countries also, as well as, two people in the same family. So whenever there is conflict that arises in a situation, it gives us a lot of, like I had mentioned before, a lot of stress, negativity around us. And it's very human pursuit to eliminate anything that doesn't serve us. So that is how conflict is a blessing in disguise. You want to make yourself better. You want to identify the root cause, remove it, so that, going forward, growing up, you do not encounter the same problems ever again. And I think this is the short way to develop and grow personally as well as an organization. Right. So I hope you can, I'll just have a look at your faces. So isn't it beautiful to see that how, difference in opinion, difference in personalities, which is very natural, it does not always lead to disagreements and fights and violence. It can also lead to beautiful things, right? Like better conversations, good communication, self-growth, like we just experienced. Okay, so we move on to the next slide. Okay, so I know I just said that there's a good side and a bad side, but how do we move from a negative to the positive? It's through conflict management. Yes, that is what I'm arriving at. And okay, so like we experienced, like you would have experienced when I read your messages in the chat box, that whenever we find ourselves in conflict situations, it brings with itself stress, discomfort, and it's very depressing and frustrating situation, for all parties involved, even for ourselves in our minds, with other people in our family, friends, colleagues. But it is, like I said before, it is unavoidable, inevitable. We cannot just keep on avoiding it at all times. And especially in school, because you will have hundreds, or even if you have a smaller classroom, you have a lot of people who have diverse personalities. You cannot avoid conflict. So it, of course, affects the smooth running of teaching and learning process, right? Because if you carefully look at conflict, you would see that it's leading to a lot of stress in the classroom. So how do we manage it? How do we turn it into the golden prospect for growth? This is what I'll just show you next. So before defining what is conflict management, I'll just tell you that, to manage conflict, we need some kind of strategy, some kind of methods, so that, the potential that conflict has to turn into a very positive growth opportunity for us, we are able to take advantage of that, and we're able to minimize the harmful effects. So, how experts have defined conflict management is that it's the practice of being able to identify and to handle stress sensibly, fairly, efficiently, all big words. But simply speaking, it's simply whatever is the barrier to peace, whatever is the barrier to an amicable solution, we remove it. That is conflict management. We are not saying that it will be resolved, that two people who have different personalities will suddenly have similar personalities. But whatever barriers those personalities are posing, we will remove them. It's as simple as that. And also, conflict management does not mean that conflict will end. It just means that it will be an ongoing procedure to keep eliminating the bad parts and identifying the potential into what can turn out to be good. So you can never say, oh, I managed my conflict and now it's gone. It's always an ongoing process. And I know it can sound very negative that, this. So I don't know if you are able to understand Hindi, but I'll just speak a little phrase in my language. We say that ये तो खत्म ही नहीं हो रहा है, which means it's not ending only, but it's actually a very beautiful thing, because it means the path to growth and the path to resolving something so negative is will always be there. And I think as humans, this is what life is, right? To flow, to become better, to know more, right? So if we'll move to the next slide. So we've been talking about strategy. But what is this strategy? It's nothing. I'll just simplify the words. Sometimes I use very fancy words and all in corporate lingo. It's simply a method. So conflict management strategy is simply a method, or we can say specific patterns of behavior that we adopt in conflict situations. Like, is that clear, or do I make it more simple? I'll just look at your thumbs up if it's easier to understand. Like, okay, thank you. And if you want me to repeat something, please unmute yourself. I'll be happy to repeat or even explain more. So, what kind of conflict management strategy we choose actually depends on like a lot of things, but we'll focus on 3 for now. So one is the level of conflict, which is interpersonal, intrapersonal, intergroup, and intragroup. It's pretty self-explanatory, but we'll just try to understand it a little bit. Interpersonal, as it's clear, is like between two people. And intrapersonal is if we are conflicted within ourselves, if there is something that is pulling us apart in 2 directions, some 2 ideas, 2 feelings, 2 perceptions of the same situation. So that is intrapersonal. And then also intergroup. Usually in social scenarios, we always have 2 groups, whether it's within the family and especially at workplace. There always be different groups who have different needs, different wants, and this is how people come together, right? Students who would, for example, be interested in science tend to hang out together in the labs, and students who are good at sports, you'll always find them sharing and talking about in recess and lunch periods about what's new in sports and stuff like that. So it's very natural for groups to be formed, but because every group that has come together has very unique and different collective needs, it's similarly between 2 people, you will find that the groups also have a lot of conflicting situations, conflicting demands. They will act in very conflicting ways. And then intra-group. Maybe, for example, we all are here to learn, right? But maybe I want to learn through your experiences, and someone else within this group, all the participants, some of them want to learn through slides, some want me to give examples. So our needs within the group are also different, right? This may lead to, opposing views or clashes sometimes. We will not agree on it. So now we know that to manage conflict, the methods that we are going to choose, how do we choose them? Based on these 3 things. One is the level of conflict. So you will have to see, is this conflict within myself, or is this within 2 people or 2 groups? That is how we'll see. Now, another thing that we have to keep in mind is the situation of the conflict. Like, what is the environment in which I'm feeling disagreement within myself? Or, is this a fight over resources, over feelings, or what are the parties involved? So we have to be very mindful of what it actually is the situation. Usually, whenever we come across any conflict situation, we try and write it down, note it down so that we define it. Now, there's another thing which is very interesting, based on which usually we take decisions. It is self-concern versus others' concern. Like, what do I want the outcome of this conflict to be? Like, do I want to win, or do I want to make the other person feel happier? So this is also what all these three together will help you decide, okay, which is the method that I need to choose to make my conflict management strategy. Can I have the next slide? Okay, thank you. So I'm going to give you 5 methods. Just hold on. So these 5, I'll just speak them right now. Just stay on the slide. These are avoiding, compromising, accommodating, competing, collaborating. Now, what is avoiding? Whenever we are in a conflict situation, how to manage? Sometimes how we manage is, it is we ignore it. We say, oh, there's no conflict. And a lot of times the reason behind it is that maybe I do not have the capacity to engage with it, or maybe I'm very afraid of what would happen if I intercept the situation. So these are some of the scenarios in which we actually leave the conflict altogether and we dissociate from it. I'll try and explain a little bit. And also, I'm not saying, or just do not assume that avoiding is a bad thing. Sometimes conflicts get resolved themselves. For example, there's a group project. As a teacher, I am presiding over, and 2 students are fighting over who will do which part. As a teacher or as an educator, as a person to help them, we may think that, okay, let me just listen to them, let me interfere. But sometimes these issues are too small or trivial. The students may find a middle path, or they will come to a conclusion themselves. So use discernment in that scenario. That is this worth, like, make a judgment. So basically discernment means make a judgment. Is it worth spending my time and energy on? So it's not bad to always avoid it. Sometimes it's also good. Having said that, sometimes if you're avoiding the conflict, do ask yourself before taking this method, this strategy, ask yourself, am I doing this because I'm afraid of the unknown? Or maybe I feel like I will not be able to do it, or it will affect me adversely. Once you weigh them down, the pros and cons, then you take this method. We'll just move to the next slide. Another is competing. Now, if you look at the picture that I've posted, so our solution to manage conflict sometimes could also be to compete. So maybe there are 2 teachers and they want to present an idea for the annual function, or at home, 2 siblings who want to put in their say about a given problem. So they would look at each other as competitors. They'll be like, okay, the only way to resolve it is to win, like either my way or the highway, right? So competing usually is very uncooperative. And if you remember the past few slides, I had talked about something very interesting, self-concern versus others' concern. So if in this scenario, in a conflict scenario, you put your concern over everybody else's, then you know that this is the method that you need to take. I'll repeat again, my way or the highway. So this is how you judge. Okay, is competing going to give me the best results? Then I will compete to manage this conflict. And usually this is used by people who want to win a conflict situation at all costs, or even by those people for whom the stakes are very high. If they lose a situation, or if they want their idea to be presented or their action to be taken, they compete. And I'll give you an example. During the Indo-Bangladesh war, there was an army general whose idea or solution to the war was to help people of Bangladesh, and the prime minister of country was not agreeing to it. So that general did an unprecedented. I know this is an example from a war, but this is how, like, it's a very famous example. So the general went against the prime minister, and this is a huge thing, right? So in scenarios where you know that whatever I'm saying is the best, and without it, I may also face consequences, you take the competing method. Okay, now we'll move on to the another one. So the third method is called accommodating. It's like, okay, as you say, whatever you say. So you may look at the picture, like the person who's in charge or who's trying to manage the conflict, they want others to be happy or content, and they can also do so at the cost of, you know, their happiness, their conviction, or even the outcome that they think is the best. Now, this strategy is also called, you know, appeasing, smoothing, because we are simply telling the opposite party or even the opposite group that whatever you are saying is the only way that this can be done. So I agree with you, and let us resolve this method. However, there is a problem. Now, this seems very easy for a people pleaser if you put others' wants over yourself. So a very good litmus test for this method is you ask yourself, do I know that the method I'm trying to tell or the idea that I am proposing or the belief that I have or the action that I want to take is the best outcome ever? If yes, then do not please the other party. Go ahead and, you know, choose some other method according to the situation. So I've given you now both the pros and cons, like which is the situation in which you can accommodate and which is the situation in which you don't need to accommodate. There are other 4 methods that you can use to manage that conflict. Next slide, please, Sarah. Thank you so much. Okay, now this 4th method is called compromising. I think the word itself is self-explanatory. Compromising means a middle way. So I win some part of this conflict, this argument, and you win some part. But also we don't win completely. I will lose out on something. So we'll find what is better for both of us, and we'll take a little bit from both ideas or a little bit from both benefits, and we'll create a middle solution. This is also called, you know, a lose-lose strategy or a win-win strategy, but it's not 100%. You will have to let go of some parts of your conviction, and you will have to have the heart to accept what the other person or the other group is saying. And also a situation in which it is good to compromise is that when it will just not be possible to make both parties completely happy, then you know that the best outcome is to take the best of both parts. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. Thank you. So this is the 5th method, and I hope while I'm talking about them, explaining them a little bit, you are also thinking about the conflict scenario that you wrote about. If not, I'll give you some time later to you know, make connects between these 5 and your scenario. So collaborating, it sounds like a very good method, right? Because in this, all of you come together not to choose the best parts, unlike in compromising of your own idea or your own conviction perception, but you come together and you may in fact create a new solution or a new situation that suits everyone and everyone is happy. So see, it's also a little bit like compromising, but it involves a lot of mutual work, like you come together. Sometimes this solution that you come up with or the outcome that you want is completely different from what you perceived when you entered the situation of conflict. And it could be seen in a lot of legal fields when 2 parties come with a die-hard solution, like, okay, no, I want to win this, and the other one says, no, I want to completely win this. But the lawyer or the mediator would tell them, okay, if you choose the third thing, nobody loses, but everybody wins. I know this is very this is an example very set away from what you usually do. But another good strategy is if there's a new curriculum that a school wants to develop or a team wants to develop for a certain set of students, and somebody comes from a project-based learning background, someone comes from an academic background, they all have their convictions on how to devise the best study material for a child, for his overall development, right? But they're also coming from different solutions. In this, a very common good thing is that they all have their strengths, and sometimes it clicks in such conflict situations when they realize, okay, we all have our strengths, let's just put together and make a completely new curriculum that has a little bit of everything combined together, like the knowledge combined together. So this is what collaborating looks like. Can we move to the next slide, Sarah? Now this slide will give you an overall view of the 5 methods, and it will also tell you a little bit more on when to use which method. The x-axis that you see is cooperativeness, that how much do you have concern for others, and the vertical line, the y-axis, is assertiveness, what we talked about previously, which is self-concern. So self-concern versus concern for others based on that. Now when you avoid a situation, you're not doing nobody any good, right? I know I told you that in some situations it's very important, actually it demands to be avoided, but in other cases you're doing nobody any good. Like you're just you're not asserting what you know is the best for the situation, for the person, for the group. At the same time, you don't even want to engage with them and understand their perspective. Now in this, if you look at you'll find competing is when you completely 100% assert, but you're not ready to cooperate or collaborate at all. So I think when you look at the graph, it will explain itself. I'll try, I don't know what, yeah, the time is a little bit less. I want to talk more to you. So I hope this is clear. I'll just have a look at you. Do you want me to talk more about it? Like if this, yes, otherwise you can do this, but it's enough. So I'm looking at your screens right now, your faces. Do you want me to talk more about the axis on when to choose which method? You can unmute yourself if you want.
Clear. I think it is pretty clear, but maybe we can everybody can come up with examples of how do they practice any of these methods that you just mentioned with people in their lives.
Right. So I have a very interesting activity come up where we would all be at the same time able to produce probably a lot of examples on when to use which method. If you can move on to the next slide, I will just demonstrate. Okay, so now this is a very interesting part. Remember the conflict scenario that you wrote about? Just keep that in front of you and identify which was the method you were previously using to deal with it. And now that you have this newfound knowledge, write about, is it the same method that now you will use, or there's a new method that you will use, and why you will use it. To explain that a little bit, we'll give you about 5 to 10 minutes. Is it clear what we're going to do now?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Thank
you. Pardon, what did you say? I couldn't get it.
Shall I go first? I said, shall I go first?
Yes. Do you want to take some time to write it down?
No, I just want to share whatever I have experienced.
Okay. So do you mind if we take 5 minutes for others to just write down, and then we'll go and listen to each other? Do you mind that? So that they have some time. Meanwhile, can I request Sarah, can you go back to the previous slide so that they can have a visual representation of the methods? Yes. So you can use this to identify which method you were using previously to manage your conflict. Because you will, I can assure you, if you have a conflict situation in your life, you will definitely be using one of these methods, knowingly or unknowingly. And I know, Amrita, you're done. And whenever someone else is done, just raise your hand. So we'll start speaking about it a little bit. While you're writing, I'll also just tell you, usually what are the other tools? These are the methods and strategies, but what are the other tools that you can use to help you choose which method is the best? Always acknowledge the conflict. Like, do not avoid it unknowingly. By avoid, I don't mean the method that we used, but sometimes we tell ourselves lies. We're like, everything is good. If you're not talking to somebody, maybe we don't find a time to talk. So do not do that. Always acknowledge that yes, there is a problem, there is a situation which is different than the usual, there is stress in the atmosphere, or I'm being aggressive to myself, to somebody else. So always acknowledge it and address it. Next thing that you should do is define the problem. What exactly happened? What is it that you want? And what is it that is unfavorable to you or in disagreement with you or your group? So define it very well. And then if it's a problem between the two of you, then like two people or even two organizations, departments, groups, the best way is to meet on neutral ground. When I say meet on neutral ground is without getting emotions involved, spell out how you perceive the situation. Like, tell the other person, express without allegations, without it being getting emotional or charging at others. Say, this is how it looks for me. And also at the same time, after you're done speaking, give the other person some time to share their perception of the scenario or how they are dealing with it, how they are experiencing it. So to meet on the neutral middle ground is always a good idea. Next is, and I think we have mentioned a little bit, let everyone have a say. Like, give everybody the chance to speak out and define and share the problem for themselves. Do not leave out anybody. This is a short way to manage any kind of conflict. Don't let anybody aside. Like, involve everybody who's involved, who's how do I explain it? Who's a part of the problem. Like, involve each of them to become a part of the solution. So this is how we move forward. And towards the end, when we have everything on the table very clearly, transparently, let's all agree on a solution. So this is how you manage a conflict. And I know coming to an agreement is a very long path and sometimes very emotionally charged and difficult. But if everyone is clear, if they're communicating well, like I've told you before, like share how you perceive, how you feel about things, and listen to everybody, then it will not be so difficult to agree for one thing in a given situation. Okay. Now, shall we discuss our conflict situations? If there's a situation that is very personal to you and you don't want to share it in front of everyone, that's okay. Just you can say that I want to pass, and you can reach out to Sarah or to me. And if you want to, share and have somebody to talk about it. And if there is no, or maybe in some case, you've not been able to arrive at a conclusive step about which is the perfect method to manage your conflict, then also you can share. Okay, so now, Amrita, you may go ahead and share. Just share the conflict situation you were in and how were you managing it before. And after getting equipped with this newfound knowledge of these 5 methods of managing a conflict, then what is the most appropriate and effective method that you would want to choose now with this newly armed knowledge?
Thank you for giving me the chance. Actually, this session was previously taken by us also as our Sarah ma'am, and it is really working with me, especially because I am the person who react on certain things very quickly. If somebody argue with me and if somebody has given comments, negative comments to me, then I used to react so quickly with anger and being conflict. So before 2 years ago, I used to have this kind of feelings inside me, but whenever just when I took this class by Sarah ma'am and I applied certain techniques to control our emotions, like anger, such things. So now these days, as we are teachers and we have to face so many people with different arguments and different thoughts, opinions, ideas, and every opinions, ideas are not matched with us. So now I'm realizing that all other persons are not like us that we want. So we have to accept the situation. We have to accept the other's opinion also. And being a teacher, and I'm like a administrative part of the school also. So I have to face the committee members and parents association and so many people. So and sometimes I may have a take conflict situation arguments that are not matched with us. So what I do is I just first listen to them very carefully, and I smile and I smile and I reply them with very it's okay, we will do. I just avoid my anger. I just avoid and I just feel free to them to keep all those negative thoughts inside us because if we go together with the negative comments both sides, then the conflict may go longer forever. So what I do is
Right.
I just avoid. I just avoid. I used to compete before, but now I am doing is I avoid, and I sometimes I compromise also. So talking about the recent conflict, I just say that I am having conflict with the school management. Sometimes we are both also. So at that time also, I just don't react now. I just listen to them very carefully and I avoid. And with personal matter, recently 2 months, 3 months ago, I had a little conflict with my close friend. Sarah knows that, but I don't want to tell her name. So we were very close to each other and we were working together each other for 5 years. And what she did is the school was about to resume after 2 days, and before 2 days she decided to leave the school without being getting a much salary in other school. So, and I told her it's very wrong because you could tell this to before 1 month earlier. It's not good. And just she went for money. I said that money is everything. And I said money is not only everything. So this kind of conflict had us. And I said to Sarah also, and she again remind me what kind of lesson you got earlier. Just remind that. And I just remind, and I feel cool, relaxed, and I excuse her, and our relation is going good now, but not so like earlier. So that was my recent conflict, and at that time I just avoid whatever she did. I just avoid the situation, and everything is going good now. Thank you so much.
Thank you for sharing, Amrita. I'll tell you something very good about you based on the methods that you're choosing to manage conflict. You put others' concern over your own. And that I think comes from a place of empathy and wanting the best for others. So, which method we choose or how we respond to conflict also tells us a lot about who we are as people. And it's definitely clear that you put others' well being and concerns over your own, right? Just try in some scenarios if possible. You can also try to be a little bit selfish, like, okay, I should also put my own happiness, what I want, over others sometimes. So this could be a good way to move forward. But thank you for sharing. It shows us how beautiful of a soul you are. So thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
So anyone else is ready to share? We can also try, because we just have a little time left, we can try to share very briefly the conflict situation and what were the method we were knowingly or unknowingly using earlier. And now with this knowledge that we have, how would we manage these conflict situations moving forward? You can go next. Anybody can just unmute yourself and feel free to talk about it.
Anybody else likes to share about a conflict and how they managed it?
Hello, ma'am. I would like to share about my opinion regard conflict management. Now, I have I would like to talk about my college life, and I'm an undergraduate student. I have completed my bachelor's degree in environment science. Being a science student, and most of the time our assignment is related with research and project, and we have to work in a group because we cannot solve the research problem by alone in college. And so when I was in my BSc fourth year, and there have lots of students who have a different opinion regarding their project, their work, and they have a teamwork, and it's very hard to manage, and we cannot deal with others. They have different topic, different ideas, and diverse people comes together and giving their ideas, and everybody want to get their first priority for their one project, and they have a competition. And I'm a student who don't like to speak much in class, and being an introvert kind of person. And most of these students think that even if I'm not going to share about the ideas, they think that I may not know anything about the research. That's why they have a dominate kind of thing between a student. And that time, some students think they always want to get higher marks in. Some students are average. They have a competition, and we always try to do the best on our sites, but our supervisor also watching us that who is doing good or not. And that time, yeah, there have lots of competition between the student, and that is the thing that how we worked on the research. And the next one here have a collaboration, and collaborating work is of it sounds good, but it's very hard to deal with individuals, because everybody want to be like a superior. They think themselves that smart, they have smart ideas. They want to do something greater than compared to next one. And in collaborative work, it's really hard to deal with it. And the same thing happened with our team also, and I also have that experience. So that's why I found there we have to compromise with some topics if there have any issues, and sometimes we have to avoid the situation if we want to correct it. And that's why sometimes if we think that we can deal with the situations, then we can discuss with our friend to solve the problem. And sometimes if we don't think like that we are good at the regard the project, regard the work, then that time, and if that is not necessary, then we can avoid the topic. If we can work on it, then we have to be collaborate with another group kind of things what happened in my college. That was my experience. Thank you.
Thank you, Maya. That's a very good and deep understanding of different conflict management strategies. And I think the examples that you shared of in which situations you would use different management styles is, I'm like very happy with it. And if you ever find, definitely collaboration is difficult because it requires you assessing the situation and putting on the table what everybody wants. I think for a group, it would be a very good idea to periodically, from time to time, put on the table on a common ground that you have come together for one purpose. That is the one common goal of all of these individuals. So if you work towards that together individually, it could help a little bit to collaborate. So like I mentioned before, that it's easier to manage conflict when you listen to everybody, and when you share how you feel and also how everybody else feels. In a similar way, for a group working towards one common goal, it helps to keep reiterating that, because it will put the focus back to where it should be. But thank you for sharing. It's a very good understanding of different management styles, and you just shared different scenarios for all of us. It's a good mental exercise for us also. Thank you. Does anyone else want to share? if you do not want to share for now, but there's something else you want to ask, or ask for a friend. So that could also be done. Is there anything else you want to talk about? We just have like 1 minute. I hope we can extend it for a couple of minutes if you want to talk more, if you want to ask something, or even if it's unrelated to the topic and you want to talk about it for 1 minute.
I can also stop the recording so it is not recorded, if that makes you feel better. Right,
yeah. If not, if everyone